And you might think, there's no way I have drought stress. I'm watering 4 days a week. That heat is going to do a number on it. So just changing your expectations that during these times of extreme heat, anything that's living is trying to protect itself.
All right, so welcome to episode 13 of Behind the Turf. We're really excited to be back in the podcast studio, and today we're talking about protecting your lawn from drought stress. And it's something that's been really just a very common issue here in Georgia, and I'm excited to be joined with Jared Koenig, our agronomist.
Yellow.
And then, of course, we've got Ruth Wilkerson, who is our support team lead. I love having the two of you guys together because I think we have that, that textbook from you, and I think we also get that real world kind of, what are clients experiencing from you, Ruth? Because you're talking to the clients with your team every day, and so kind of kicking it off, how do we get to a point with drought stress? Like, what takes us to that point, Ruth?
Really, it can be just prolonged periods of no rain. It doesn't have to be an official drought where they've announced it and said that we're in a drought, but just a prolonged period of not a lot of rain, which in Georgia can happen from year to year. You never know when that's going to pop up, but it's definitely not uncommon to happen here.
Yeah, it's like predictable, but not predictable,
Yeah, it's going to happen, but when is always a bit of a question. It seems different every year when it's going to happen.
Yeah, and I feel like sometimes it's like when it happens, you don't even know. Like it's been happening and you didn't even realize it. And it's almost like getting that out to the client and to the public of like, hey, you might need to be watering more. It's like very challenging.
Well, we talk about it every year. It seems like we'll have a wet spring or something along those lines. And it is a shock that first time starts to come through, and it catches everybody off guard. I mean, having been in golf for a lot of years, it always seemed like there was always that one day you drove by that one fairway that's the first one to dry out, and you're like, oh.
Yeah.
Time to turn them up.
It happens before you realize it, and then you're playing catch up.
Yep.
Trying 100%. To get the lawn back where it needs to be.
And I think, from a operation standpoint, or just talking to the client support standpoint, I guess I would say, like letting the clients know about the drought, getting them to change their irrigation, adding more water to the lawn. The luck is that all of a sudden we get into a wet pattern.
Oh, sure.
And then you're trying to be like, stop watering,
Whoa.
Because if we talked in our irrigation podcast, like too much water can be just as damaging as not enough.
Yeah.
But,
I know there's so many times I hope that is just like a known thing, but I always say, like, once we get rainfall, accommodate for that when you're setting your irrigation or whatever. But it's just tough. Again, in times of drought, we don't know when those pop-up showers might come, or the fact that those might not be enough.
Yeah.
So,
but sometimes with good, when someone's running the irrigation system and we just get those random pop-up showers, that's just enough to give the lawn what it needs to look really great. So when you take out that pop-up shower, it's like dun dun dun.
Yeah. Because rainfall,
terror music.
Yeah, rainfall has a completely different effect on the lawn than just irrigation alone. There are things in the rain, nutrients in the rain that
you just can't get from it.
You cannot.
It's crazy, but you can't. Even the people that are like, I'm watering so much, and they're like, I'm doing that at my house too. I'm like, yeah, it doesn't look the same.
Yeah.
It just doesn't look the same as natural rainfall.
Yeah, there's reasons for that. Mineralization and cation exchange capacity for my nerd friends out there.
Yeah, okay, well.
Okay, cool.
Jared, we can always count on you. Always count on you.
And that's why I'm here for the normal people.
We probably, for the people that have been listening for this long, like they're probably thinking, some people are like, what are they even talking about still?
Sure.
Let's talk about the, what are the signs to look for besides the lack of water? What are the signs? Because every lawn's a little different. So some lawns are going to show signs of drought stress way before others.
Sure. Yeah. I think it's important to acknowledge that water is a non-negotiable for plants. It is fundamentally important for a lot of processes within the plant, and it is an absolute. It is needed. Drought stress is just a response to stress within the plant itself. So when it doesn't have enough water, it's going to start expressing itself in that way. Lots of variables in the landscape can change this. Amount of light exposure, direct light exposure, when it's exposed to that light. And then there's always really tough stuff. The hardest things to explain to people are when there is inconsistencies in things like soil texture and localized dry spots. And what's the cause? There's all kinds of things that can cause that. And if we went into those, we'd be here for hours, and you guys would be asleep, and I'd be all jacked up talking about all manner of situations that can create very unique small dry spots in a yard. But the important thing to acknowledge is that what it is the plant is stressed out, and then there's a progression to that too. There'll be a loss of luster, meaning it may not be as vibrant and green as it is when we're in periods of prolonged
it's that
rainfall.
discoloration to me is like that kind of first sign. I feel like, and it sometimes I'm like, have I been staring at grass for too many years?
Yeah.
But it's like you can see when people are like, "Oh, my yard's like," and I was like, "Oh no, I can see this like pattern that's starting to evolve in the lawn."
Well, and as you guys acknowledged too, I mean, like there is a difference between when we're in a period of really good natural rainfall and when we're having to utilize irrigation as a sort of fundamental water delivery method, because there are reasons. You're not crazy. If you wonder if you're crazy, you're not crazy. There are situations where rainfall certainly is better, but irrigation bridges that gap. And there is a progression too. So not only do you go, there's a lack of luster in the beginning, but then when you start to get critically dry, when the plant is uncomfortable and it's going to be physically damaged, it will go from that to a more pronounced discoloration. If you have polarized sunglasses on, you can see it actually progress from like almost a whitish through a grayish sheen. And then eventually as the leaves kind of give up the ghost, it'll turn tan. Zoysia actually will turn like almost a bright yellow color too. If it's really, really hot and really stressed out, it'll turn a very interesting color.
Besides the color, I know wilting's like a big thing, but like how do clients tell if their lawn is wilting,
Yeah.
Like it's not
that
like
gray
like
color.
an azalea plant,
Yeah. So it's broadleaf plants. They will have the shrivel, right? Like I've got a dogwood tree in my yard right now that is still very dry from this year's wilt. From this year's drought. And so we've all seen the way that a plant will, a broadleaf that has a large leaf on it will sort of wilt and hang. But it's as turf grass loses that turgor pressure, as turf grass wilts too, it's that grayish discoloration. And sometimes too, you'll notice when you walk through your yard, your footprints will stay.
Yeah, or when you cut your yard, like if you continue to see those lines like a day or two later, they don't pop back up. I thought that was an easy way to
Scientifically, that's because there's not enough turgor pressure in the tissues, but that's because it's because it's dry.
Yeah.
It's wilting.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was just going to add, I think the most important thing to remember for clients is just really simple, is if you have a house plant, which is easy for me to relate to, you can't go a long period of time without watering that plant. Like you're dealing with a living thing. You need water.
Yeah.
We joke around, like go lay out in your lawn for 8 hours and don't drink anything and see how you feel at the end of the day.
Right.
You need water under the best of circumstances. It's a living plant. It's a living organism. It constantly needs water. It doesn't need one little burst of rainfall once a week. It needs it constantly throughout the week, throughout the month, until it goes into dormancy and it's, kind of preserving itself through that process.
And I think that's a really good point. I love the analogy of laying out in the lawn. It's just a really good way, I think, for people to kind of relate to it, and the fact that like it, none of us could lay out in a lawn for 8 hours without needing a drink of water, right?
Yeah, and it's alive just like we are, so it needs basic things like water and sunlight. So it's just a good reminder that's just start there. And it also takes time. Recovery takes time. It's not going to happen just because you started watering last week. It doesn't mean that this week everything's going to look perfect. It's going to start the process of recovering, and that's going to be, again, it's a living thing. It requires patience to repair and things like that.
So that kind of leads me to the next thing. But Ruth, when we're talking about drought stress, what's the most common misdiagnosis when we're talking to clients? They're either calling in and saying they're a landscaper, or maybe something they've self-diagnosed based off the internet. Like what is it people say when they initially see that look of the lawn?
The most common thing I hear is disease. I have a disease. My lawn has a disease. And it's easy to feel that way because the rest of their lawn looks good. That's the most common thing. There's several things that people assume when they call in that's going on. And 99.9% of the time, it's drought stress.
Yeah.
We always want to be open to the possibility that something else could be going on. But when you see the same situation every single day, over and over and over, all day long, 8 hours a day, you feel very confident in the patterns. Fungal diseases have very specific patterns. They need very specific environmental things to occur. And drought stress also has very specific mannerisms. So, but the most common thing is assuming that their lawn has a disease. And it comes from a little bit of fear, you know, like you don't want to lose your lawn. You're thinking I'm doing all the right things. And you are. You just need to adapt a little bit to an ever-changing environment. And like Jared said, there could be something with the soil in that particular spot. Any weak spots in your lawn are going to come out during times of stress. So, but yeah, fungal diseases is the most common thing. And then every once in a while, somebody will feel like it's grubs. And again, just a scientific understanding, like most of the time, there's not grubs in the soil right now. It's not time. They're beetles. So we're really dealing with just there's a couple possibilities.
We'll get the occasional person too that fears that maybe we burnt something or,
Yeah.
you know, but those are very specific instances too. And I will give some assurance that it's very easy to tell between all of these things. And a simple conversation most of the time will illuminate what that is. One of the biggest things, and I enjoy talking with people about these, but one of the biggest things to consider is not looking past the obvious in an attempt to find something that you are really intent on finding, because you can make yourself see what you want to see. One of the things that I caution people against is looking past the obvious in an attempt to find something that isn't particularly obvious to them. And a lot of times in a situation like drought versus disease, for instance, they have almost like opposite needs. Disease likes to be cool and moist. Fungal infections like to be cool and moist, where drought is hot and dry and very, you know, they require very different things.
And from a customer service standpoint, like on this side of the business, we would never want a fungal situation to get out of control. We are the first ones who would want to be aware and treat it.
Yeah.
But we also have integrity behind us. So we don't want to just be selling things that you don't need.
Sure.
We don't want to be telling you need something that you don't. We want to actually help you find a solution. And so that integrity drives every diagnosis and every decision that we make. And I think that's the most important thing for our particular clients to remember is we really do care.
Yeah,
and we're not going to sit around and tell them it's not fungal and watch their lawn.
That also
Right.
drives, you know, product selection and
Right.
application method and how we do that too, because we're here to grow grass. You know, we're not here to
Right.
hurt grass and
Yeah.
stuff. And let's.
Yeah, and I just I feel like I can totally understand where the client's coming from when they feel like it's a disease. I think a lot of times to me it's so obvious that it looks like a disease when we get that pop-up shower after 30 days of no rain, and then parts of the yard green up and parts don't. And it looks very patchy, as if there's a disease in the lawn. But I think from a support standpoint, it would sure be easy to just sell a fungicide and move on, you know. But I think the reality is that it's a patience game at that point.
Yeah.
We've got to change our practices, pay a little more attention to the lawn.
It's a partnership.
Yeah.
Well, I never blame people for connecting the dots that they have at their disposal. And it's one of the things that we talk a lot about as a team is making sure that we help to illuminate the other dots that and educate people so that way that we can see the whole picture, you know.
Okay, so this kind of segues us over to the end here where I want to talk, you know, kind of end the podcast here on, okay, so oops, we went out of town, or oops, we didn't realize it was so dry out. Like we've got that damage that looks like disease, but it's really just drought stress. All right, Ruth, what are we telling clients?
Start watering.
Right.
Mow weekly. Understand that first mow is probably going to exacerbate the situation. You're going to cut some more color off. It's going to look worse before it gets better. So patience, start watering. It will recover. Just give it time, give it lots of love. We're giving it the nutrients it needs. You have to give it the TLC that it needs outside of that, and to just have patience. So
Yeah.
Resist the urge to do too much too. I think a lot of times when we get into situations like these where maybe the yard doesn't look the way that we want it to, or you know, people are worried that there may be other stuff going on, there is this temptation to just want to, what can I do? What can I do? What can I do? And the truth of the matter is you can do too much to a lot of times. It's important to just focus on those base needs.
Yeah.
We got the nutrition covered, as Ruth said. Make sure that the needs are met, and you just let the turf do what it wants. It's a very resilient organism. It wants to survive.
Yeah.
Give it the opportunity to do that without getting hurt anymore, and it'll do what it needs to do.
Yeah. So really just mowing and watering. That's it, huh?
Yeah. Well, and it's like, you can do a little, once it starts to bounce back through and stuff too, you can do a little top dress and stuff like that too. But in the beginning, just start simple. Do what that turf grass needs to be. Address its base level needs and let it do its thing.
And two, just remembering like the basic principles of watering, which I know have probably been discussed in the irrigation podcast, but watering deeply, not just these quick, we talk to a lot of clients. It's like 20 minutes in the morning, 20 minutes at night. Deep morning waterings allow those roots to grow deeper down and establish well and all those things, instead of having that like surface root growth and compaction in the soil, which then causes all these other problems.
Yeah, and I think too, it's like taking mental note. Like I know in my yard, because I've been there for so many years, like I know where my dry spots are. I know where my irrigation coverage isn't the best, or there's the soil underneath it's just a little different. So when we go through dry periods, I just keep my little sprinkler that my kids love to run through, and I just plop it in the yard and I let it run for like 20 minutes once a week, just to give a little extra water to those areas I know are going to show signs of drought stress.
Yeah.
Well, and it conditions where things do get stressed out. Ruth mentioned before too. When it comes to situations where those things are identified, we can see that as kind of a positive thing too, because now we know in the future, okay, well, last time we were in a condition like this one part on the right, this knoll on the right side of my yard was the first to turn. Well, now you know.
Yeah.
You start to see that happen, and there is a lot of positivity and learning that about your space, because now you know where to put that kid sprinkler and let it run for a while and give it that extra little bit there.
And I keep thinking of things to add, which is going to make this longer than it probably needs to be. But
no, it's great.
The other
Thanks.
thing to remember too is heat stress. Like you can be watering in a way that you think is sufficient, but heat, and you might think there's no way I have drought stress. I'm watering 4 days a week. That heat is going to do a number on it. So just changing your expectations that during these times of extreme heat, anything that's living is trying to protect itself. Just like you stay indoors in the air conditioning, it's stressing the turf out. So it's still you still might do all the right things, and depending on where that turf is located and how much direct sunlight it's getting, it could still get a little bit of scorch or a little bit of just heat stress. So it's important to remember that too, that you can do all the right things and still have a little bit of something going on, and that's okay. That's normal. Again, you're dealing with something living. Your control goes so far in that.
And I have to plug a smart irrigation controller. I'm just huge fan of it. It's a couple $100 upgrade if you do it yourself. Maybe you have someone come in, it's a little bit more because you got to pay them to install it. But wow, what a difference it's made on my lawn. And it's not even that the controller is perfect, but it's the app that's on your phone that you're holding every day that's reminding you of, we're seasonally adjusting your irrigation, or we're skipping, we're this or that. It's a constant notification depending on how you set it up. My favorite is the Ratio. It's just been a great way for me to better irrigate my lawn, and it has saved me. It has more than paid for itself when we go through those periods of really wet weather.
We had a client who, her parents' lawn had drought stress. She doesn't live there.
Yeah.
We told her, as she's
it.
on the phone with me, she's adjusting it.
Yeah.
She set it up to run in the mornings, up to the run times,
Yeah.
did it right from her phone, didn't have to go anywhere, do anything. I thought that was really cool and such a great example of how helpful that can be if you're out of town.
Right.
All the things.
Well, it's not like a lot of things. I mean, it actually will pay for itself when we
Yeah.
go through those wet periods. I mean,
It turns itself down or off.
Oh yeah, it's very, very good. It's way better than how they used to be when you had the little rain sensor on your roof. Like it is, it's
always
pretty
important
predictable
too. Make sure that you keep your eyes on the lawn, kind of deal. They're not perfect, so there could still be an instance where that one spot that likes to dry out first goes first, and you kind of really have to keep tabs on those things. But it's also, if you're an analytical person, it's neat to watch the way that those things analyze and make those choices too. So,
All right, so kind of wrapping this up, we've talked about why it happens, what it looks like when it's happening, and then how you can repair it, or what the expectations are. Did I miss anything?
No.
All right.
It's normal. Patience and time.
Well, we greatly appreciate you guys tuning in for episode 13. If you enjoyed this, we hope you'll follow us, whether it's Spotify, Apple, YouTube. Definitely leave us some comments. We love that feedback. It's extremely, it's really inspiring, and it helps us kind of get better. We love the feedback that you guys are giving us on the podcast. And we'll be back for episode 14.